When you think of supply chain, you might think of large shipping containers, empty store shelves, or even the pandemic.
That was certainly a time when we all found ourselves suddenly thinking about supply chain disruptions. University of Denver professor Jack Buffington explains supply chains aren't just about what's available at stores. More than that, they shape our communities, our jobs, and our future.
In this edition of The Business of Colorado, PBS 12's Franny Matthews talks to Jack Buffington, a supply chain expert, to break down how global disruptions, workforce shifts, and infrastructure decisions are reshaping our world.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Franny.
Tell me about when you got interested in this and some of your early observations.
It was probably at birth. I grew up in Baltimore, Maryland, and it was probably a field I would not want to go into because at the time I grew up in the 70s, lived in the city, and I saw all my family members losing their industry jobs to what was happening in the global supply chain. I was very curious what was happening, and I felt like there was something I had to be a part of, understanding how supply chains change and the journey that my city went through and how I can make a difference in changing that. I think it's really important to understand how things have changed over human history. So for most of human history, I would say 99.999% of human history, there was never enough of things. There was never enough supply. And so there was a lot of poverty, like most people lived in poverty. And then probably about the middle of the 19th century, fossil fuels came about, which changed everything because this is enormous power to be able to allow supply to meet demand. So things didn't really take shape until about World War II because of wars and pandemics and depressions. But then that's really when supply chain came about during World War II. It was a wartime activity, it turned into a peacetime activity, and now for the first time in human history, it was possible that supply would be able to meet demand. And so probably over the next 80, 90 years, that happened across the planet, and most notably in China, 800 million people pulled out of poverty in about 20 years. But that reached its peak around the 2008 recession through the pandemic. And so now we actually have an opposite situation that we had for most of human history. As opposed to not having enough supply, we have more supply than demand. And so you're seeing the turbulence in the global supply chain when it comes to trade wars and everything like that. More countries wanting to to balance out their supply chain.
Let's step back a little bit and get your definition of what supply chain is and global supply chain is.
Yeah, that's a great question because what I just talked to you about is how there wasn't enough supply all the way through today where there is more supply than there is demand. Now the one challenge with that is that it's optimized globally, which means that we live in a situation right now where there's people who make your clothes who live in one place and they're focused on the supply. And there's parts of the world that are focusing more on the consumption. The goal we need to move towards when it comes to supply chain is a balance between supply and demand locally, because that's what enables what happened in the United States after World War II, is we had this thing called the multiplier effect. So consumption would lead to production, and that would lead to higher wages and more prosperity, versus what you're seeing today is there's parts where people are making things and there's parts where people are consuming things, and it's out of balance. Right now what's happened since then, since the 70s and 80s, is a lot of wage growth in white-collar fields, a lot of people going to college, but industry has fallen. And so this is a challenge beyond even just the cities, and I think you're starting to see a lot of conversations, is our country needs more of a balance between industry and services in order to support people in some of those trade fields that we need for prosperity, but also we need for resiliency as a nation.
Yeah, that makes sense.
That's really important.
You know, you have talked about, you gave a really good landscape of what we're dealing with now. Are there any other big misconceptions that you see in how we look at supply chain?
Well, I think there's been so long, if we talk about talking about the United States, that what's happened is fields have been surrounding supply chain that have focused on consumption. You know, you think about what I talked about when there was never enough of things. You didn't need marketing, right? Because people always wanted to buy whatever was available. And now we have marketing, which is driving consumption, and we're really out of balance. And I think even beyond the industry side, there's a little bit of a loss of who we are and who we want to be as people, when the focus on we just need to consume more. And if you look at what happened with COVID, it was let's get the economy going again just by more consumption. We're going to encourage more consumption. And I think, one good news I think that's happening now is people are seeing it needs to be more balanced and we need to focus more on industry. Now, the challenge with that, Franny, I would tell you, is that a lot of the new areas in supply chain and manufacturing are digitized. And the challenge we have with people who are on the other side of the digital divide will not be a part of that. So there's a lot there. We really are in a unique time of history where we pretty much are at the fork of the road when it comes to the importance of supply chain, which is exciting to a person like me because this is my field. What people don't understand about supply chain is it's a process field. It's not a content field. The problem with content in our world today, it changes too fast. And so what we try to teach our students and what I did in industry is we're problem solvers. We don't try to teach people what to think, we teach them how to solve problems, which is what we love about the field. And so a lot of these challenges that people see in the industry, we just kind of get used to it. And so from the supply side and your toothpaste and your mask and your clothing and stuff like that, I think that's an easier solvable problem. I think we've lost some of our focus on best practices, and it has to do with globalization and that if we have long-tailed supply chains, which means that the blouse you're wearing, it was made in Bangladesh, we're really focusing on lower costs and we're not focusing more on quality and good practices. And this is great. It all works out well until it doesn't, right? And so there's things we can recover from, like natural disasters and things like that. But big events like the pandemic, and I would also argue the trade war, the tariffs and all that, leads to a different challenge that we face. And so what I work with companies on is going back to the principles that made us successful, focusing on quality, focusing on efficiency, these great practices that allowed the United States to really lead to success in World War II that was carried over into the 50s and the 60s is what we need to restore.
How do you take what you just said and apply it to what we're dealing with right now?
It's not without precedent. When we became industrialized, we had to train people who were farmers and we had to train immigrants from other countries. Basics in order to be able to work in industry, reading and writing and things like that. So we had to completely transform our educational system. And we're at that stage again today, right, where we have to focus on digitization, understanding technology, and frankly, we have like what I talked about, we have this digital divide right now. Our education system needs to change in order to support that.
I'd love to hear your point of view on AI kind of chomping at the heels and can be a great addition, but it also can be a threat.
The problem with AI is that, again, we talk about foundational skills, understanding how to interpret, manage, harness data. And the problem with AI is it's a shortcut from that. I tell my students that they're going to win by being critical thinkers, because the jobs I did in industry, I think there's some areas where just raw harnessing information, it could help, but it can't help you solve these problems that are complex beyond like an algorithm. There's nothing more important than curiosity.
Yeah.
I tell people in my job as a leader, my job is to ask questions, not to have answers.
Yeah.
And so I would walk around our facilities and I would just observe and I would ask questions. And I would just ask my team questions. And people think the leader's job is to tell people what to do. It's not, it's to ask questions. And so that's my fear, is if we lose that sense of curiosity, then it really is problematic.
Yeah. And I think a lot of the things that we do from a process perspective, we've always done it one way and we don't go back and question it. And that's why I like talking about supply chain, because I think there's constantly questioning on this.
Right, and these principles of like Six Sigma, quality, it came from our field.
Let's pivot a little bit to some specifics, because one of the specifics that I find very interesting is supply chain in semiconductors. 90% of the highly advanced and with nanotechnology are made in Taiwan. That seems like a bit of a pinch point to me. How do you look at the semiconductor industry and where we are, what our risks are, and what we can do to critically think our way out of this?
Yeah, it's, just to expand a little bit about the different types of semiconductors, I would categorize it in three categories. There's the commodity chips, they're in toys and things like that. They're made in China. They're probably going to be moved to Vietnam, places like that. Then there's the middle road ones that are a little bit more advanced. They're still within the industry, and I think those are the ones you're talking about are primarily made by TMSC, which is based in Taiwan. What they're trying to do as a company is try to divest a little bit in order to resiliency in case anything happens with China. So there's a lot of investment here in the United States when it comes to that space. In Arizona, there's massive infrastructure happening regarding semiconductors. But then there's the most advanced ones that require like a whole bunch of nations are involved in this. There's a lithography, there's like different components. And it's not just one country that can support that model. And so right now is primarily a Western model for those most advanced chips. And that's where I think China's pushing back and they want to be a part of this. And then you have companies that are saying, well, we'll sell some of these chips to China, but not all of them. So it's that most advanced chip, which is the big battleground. It's not really the other two.
Let's talk about Colorado. Where do you see us right now?
I'm really excited about it. And it has to do with, so being someone in industry, Colorado has always been like a point between Chicago and California or Texas. Didn't have a lot of industry, but the airport has really changed a lot of that. So if you head out east, all that area is turning into industry. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity, and especially perfect timing with, people in the United States are like, we need to focus more on industry. And the West is really going to lead the way. You heard me talk about Arizona when it comes to this, and Nevada when it comes to rare earths. In Colorado, I think the airport is number one. It's the second largest footprint airport in the world. And it's like one of the sixth largest when it comes to passenger traffic. And so now there's all this opportunity for companies to build here and to put factories here and to put logistics centers here. And I mentioned we have this initiative out there. And what I want us to bring as a university is best practices on how we do that. And so I think there's this fantastic opportunity. And I look at like cities in the past, like Fort Worth, Dallas, went through this era where they built in between and it became this really great industrial place. Like Colorado is going to be the future of that. I think Colorado and Arizona are probably two of the states that I think have the most potential. And so running a supply chain program and having these opportunities, I'm really excited about it.
That's cool. That's very cool. What are some of the obstacles that we need to overcome?
Workforce, of course. Some of the challenges with growth in housing, cost of living, things like that. I think beyond that, I think like having conversations with local governments and there's a lot of optimism and enthusiasm. So I think a lot of the impediments can be fixed. China's got the best infrastructure in the world, and it's not comfortable to say that, being an American, going there and seeing it, but it's obvious. And that's going to be really important for the future of supply chain, is if we want to bring all this manufacturing here, we have to have the right infrastructure. I mean, if you go to China and see the high-speed rail and the ports and everything like that, obviously we're not going to do things like them because we have a different form of government. But, the focus on problem solving and value is, if you're doing a project and you look at some of the tasks that are involved in this project, there's a lot of non-value add. And so what we do in Six Sigma and structured problem solving is we do a value stream map and we try to vet out all the non-value add. And whenever you look at one of these projects, like I was mentioning that semiconductor project in Arizona, it's already behind schedule. And so there's a lot of inefficiency, and we got to take this seriously. So I think it's a paradigm shift of, like, if we're serious about this, because now we're saying we are, then we have to change how we look at these projects, because we won't be able to compete without them. So we try to view ourselves as empirical and data-driven and focusing on value. Not to take a shot, well, I guess I am already, on the political side of things, is that like the politics and that look at things differently than we do. So if like these projects could be done a lot more efficiently efficiently. I mean, I know there's zoning provisions and there's studies that you have to do and all that kind of stuff, but like a good example is the whole rare earths thing. Like we now realize that as we did this trade war with China, they basically threw down the card and said, rare earths, you don't get any. We're going to shut down your automotive. We're going to shut down your defense industry. And we fought a war that we couldn't win. And so we kind of walked away from these projects because they were too difficult, they were too timely, they took too much time. My point is, if we change the paradigm of how we do these projects, then there's going to be a lot more that we bring back to the United States.
What would you like people to take away from this conversation?
I would say what I learned from my life going through this piece and why I got attracted to working in supply chain and manufacturing is the whole problem-solving aspect of it. And what I love about extending supply chain beyond what people consider to be supply chain, which is manufacturing and logistics and things like that, into fields like healthcare and government and sustainability, is using that same method for problem solving to solve big problems that we have in this country. We need to get back to these principles of doing things rationally, stop reacting to problems and solving things in the way that we used to. And I read all these, students are like, what book should I read? I'll have them read a book from like Deming from like the 1970s instead of like a pop book, because it's the principles. Yeah. It's the statistical process control. It's not complicated. Anyone can do this if you're willing to spend the time and effort on it, but there's not an easy answer to it. So I say this to my students, I say this to professionals, is like, roll up your sleeves and learn it, and you're going to be amazed in how these problems that seemed insurmountable become solvable.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time this morning. I'm hoping we'll be able to have some follow-on conversations. This was really enlightening, and I just want to say thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I enjoyed it.
Thanks again to Jack for his insight, and stay tuned for more conversations around business right here on Studio 12 as we continue with our series, The Business of Colorado.